Welcome back to the Dylan Shea channel. The Patrick Vieira project at Crystal Palace has come to an end. I've made comments on Crystal Palace at the start of the season. I said they were one of the teams to watch and one of the most exciting teams in the Premier League. Then, in one of my other videos, I said they had been having a disappointing season. I said this 10 games into the season. I feel like now is a good time to do a full video on Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have gone 12 games without a win, 11 of them in the Premier League and the other in the FA Cup, which was an elimination to Nathan Jones' Southampton. This makes Palace not just the 19th worst team in the Premier League on form in the last 5 games, as you can see here, losing 3 and drawing 2 in their last 5, but the worst team in the Premier League in 2023. You can see they don't have one win since the calendar year begun. They haven't won since a 2-0 win versus Bournemouth in the Premier League on New Year's Eve. Now, the title of this video is that I was wrong about Crystal Palace. Unless I change this title, which I might do in a few days, but hopefully I don't. If I do, then this bit is not relevant at all. But for now, the title of this video is why I was wrong about Crystal Palace. I was wrong because I was fully convinced in the Vieira project, and I think it's been really exciting. Let's take it back to last season. Patrick Vieira completely transformed and changed the trajectory of Crystal Palace in just one transfer window, bringing in Conor Gallagher, Joachim Andersen and Mark Guehi as a centre-back duo, Michael Elise and Eduard and Mateta, and he completely changed the playstyle. They were a new, energised, young and fruitful side. They racked up 48 points in Vieira's first season. That's just one off Palace's record in the Premier League. They got 49 points in the 92-93 season and in the 18-19 season under Roy Hodgson. And although Roy Hodgson did a brilliant job at Crystal Palace, it was very, 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 very dull towards the end. Definitely needed a change. In Roy Hodgson's last season, his Crystal Palace side only scored 41 goals. They lost 18 games and had a minus goal difference of 25. Vieira managed to get Crystal Palace 50 goals. They only lost 12 games, which was really impressive. And he managed to get Crystal Palace an impressive goal difference of +4. Palace were the only side outside of the top 8 with a positive goal difference. He also managed to get Crystal Palace to an FA Cup semi-final. Obviously, I don't need to tell you how huge that is for a club like Crystal Palace. Now, the difference between this season and last season is, well, for a start, we'll start with the goal difference. Crystal Palace, like I said, last year had a +4 goal difference. They currently have a -13, so there's clearly a regression that's happened. But Crystal Palace, so many times when I watched them last year, were the better side. It was very rare that I watched a Palace game and thought they were the worst side. And I actually thought at times they were very unlucky, Crystal Palace. They finished 12th. For me, they could have easily finished top 10. They should have. And I even think they could have finished top 8. They were excellent last year. The difference is this year, they're 12th this season, which is the same as last year, but they should be lower this year. Like I said, last year I thought many times they were the better team, whereas this year, I could probably count on one hand where I've thought Crystal Palace have been the better side. And that's a good place to start, I think, is Palace's playstyle. I recently had a debate with one of my friends who is a Crystal Palace fan because he thought Crystal Palace played decent against Man City. His point was that Man City are an unreal team, which they are, and that Crystal Palace defended well and only narrowly lost. They were still in the game. My point was that you have really talented players like Eze, Zaha and Elise. You have 2 ball-playing defenders in Mark Guehi and Joachim Andersen, 2 very modern centre-backs that allows you to keep possession, yet Palace are 4th lowest in the Premier League for possession. The weird thing is he left Eze on the bench as well, and Palace had 0 shots on target for the 3rd game in a row, which is a Premier League record, by the way. And they just had 0 threat. They offered absolutely nothing. And to me, that's not a good performance. Not even decent, I don't think. Man City are not unbeatable. And Crystal Palace were home. You know, in the night, Selhurst Park, that's a difficult fixture for any side. And I just thought Palace showed way too much respect to Man City. Why park the bus? I just don't understand it. Bournemouth beat Liverpool that same weekend. They didn't show loads of respect to Liverpool. There's no need to be so afraid of these big teams. Bournemouth beat Liverpool the same weekend. No, Liverpool are not better than Man City, but they're better than Bournemouth. And that Man City game epitomised Vieira this year. He has shown way too much respect for the opposition. How Crystal Palace have the 4th lowest possession in the league, for me, with 43% on average, I don't know. They have the 4th highest amount of clearances too, which just shows that, they're happy to get rid of the ball and be back under pressure. They're just not having the ball enough, and they're parking the bus, sitting back and trying to counter-attack. But when you're not a Liverpool or a Spurs who have a Harry Kane, or Liverpool when they had a Firmino to link up play, and plus the other amazing players those two teams have, those two notoriously counter-attacking. Well, Liverpool more so a few years ago, counter-attacking. Spurs still are a counter-attacking side. When you don't have that, one player, false nine sort of player there to hold it up and get the others involved, it's very hard to attack when you're playing park the bus football. And it's showing with Crystal Palace having the 2nd least amount of shots in the Premier League, just averaging 9.8 a game. Also having the 3rd least amount of touches in the opposition's 3rd. I would just like to add that I don't use stats unless I notice it myself actually watching the game. I know there's people out there like Stepman Dave who use stats to determine how good a player is or played. I find that a bit strange. I don't do that, by the way. So if I say stats, it's because I've actually noticed it, actually watching the game. Let's go on to the striker problem for Crystal Palace. Now, Edouard, I don't see it. Very few times have I actually watched Odsonne Edouard and been impressed. The only times I can think of are Tottenham on his debut and Arsenal away a year ago. For me, he should be starting Mateta. I think I've actually watched Mateta and been impressed with him. I won't lie, I've not been this year. I do think Mateta has been poor this year, but I've actually watched Mateta and thought you are an impressive player at times, especially last season. So for me, I think he should be starting him. He has good dribbling skills, physical, and it's funny because stats-wise, Edouard does destroy Mateta this year. But I think if Palace can play to his strengths, which they're not, by the way, because Crystal Palace have the least amount of crosses into the penalty box this year in the Premier League, which doesn't make sense to me as you have Michael Olise. And for me, I think Michael Olise is one of the best crossers in the Premier League. He has absolute superb delivery. So I think playing Mateta is what Patrick Vieira should have done, for me, I think, because there's actual proof of that working. It worked last season, and it also, for me, improves Olise and Eze, I think, because Eze can actually pass to someone up front who's going to get the ball and it'll stick. When Eze gets the ball, he probably has to make a through ball to Zaha every single time. When there's Mateta, he has the option to do the through ball and go short as well. And let's not forget, Eze was actually playing better when Mateta was in the squad. For me, it's really disappointing that this project has come to an end the way it did, with Palace 3 points off the relegation, the worst team in the Premier League in 2023. However, actually, I do feel for Patrick Vieira because there are problems in this side. Start with the depth. The depth really is not good enough. Jordan Ayew is still playing. The midfield has been a massive issue, and Decore has been carrying that midfield. He's only just bought in Lokonga and Amada. He's not really had time with them most of the season. It's been Decore. He also has poor options on the bench for his centre-back cover. Tompkins came in actually and played quite well, but that's one game. I don't know if he's someone at this age you can really rely on to put a consistent, running of games in. Tyrick Mitchell as well, if he's injured, he has to play every single game because the only option is Jeffrey Schlupp. So I do have sympathy for Vieira there. Also, let's not forget that his recent fixtures have been against really tough opposition. He's played Aston Villa, who are on form, Brighton, Spurs, Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, Brentford too. Most of the games he's played this year in 2023, all of them actually, I think have been teams in the top half, apart from Aston Villa. And he was coming into a game of fixtures actually that are really winnable. His next game was Arsenal at the Emirates, which is obviously tough. But after that, it was Leicester, Leeds, Southampton and Everton. So that's really winnable fixtures that he had coming up. Also, let's not forget that his main man, Wilfried Zaha, has been injured for quite a while, and he's only just sort of returned. So I think he's been really unlucky there, because he's had to really rely on Michael Olise going forward, and he's just so young. And yeah, I think if he had Zaha, maybe he would have got some better results. But again, there are things that he's done that I don't have sympathy for. I think the fact that he's been playing Ayew as a striker, or even playing Ayew at all, is his fault. I don't think he should be playing Ayew. Ayew is someone who has about 4 goal creations in about 100 games. It's not good enough. For me, if you're going to play Ayew, just play him as, an 8. Also, his in-game management has been a massive issue for Palace since he's arrived. The amount of points that Crystal Palace have dropped since Vieira has been in charge, they've got to be top 3 for dropped points from a lead. Honestly, every single time they go 1-0 up, he just goes really defensive for some reason and makes really questionable subs. Listen to what Wilfried Zaha had to say in his post-match interview, where they dropped points to Brentford after going really defensive. It's quite damning. As soon as we went in the lead, we just started to defend. I don't see why we do that. If we just continue pressing, got a second and it ends the game. And he's right. This has happened way too many times at Palace under Patrick Vieira. And the part that's damning is where he says, I don't get why we do this. That's sort of hinting at the manager. So the project is over, and I think it has to be said, I do think Patrick Vieira can be a really good manager. We saw in that first season at Crystal Palace, there is a good manager in there who can get something out of his players. Seems to be a really good man manager as well. I also really like his interviews and the way he talks. I always find him really, composed, and I just like the way he talks. Me personally, I would have given Patrick Vieira more time. I would have given him this run. I think he deserved more time, especially with the fixtures coming up. But at the same time, I do understand it. They were on really poor form and only 3 points off relegation. I also did make a poll on my Twitter asking Palace fans what they thought of the sacking. Should they have kept him or sack him? And 17 people voted, and the majority was, 79% was that they should have kept him. So I think Palace fans were on board with Vieira and would have liked to see him continue. Let me know, do you think Patrick Vieira should have been sacked or given more time? And do you think he was a Conor Gallagher away for making Palace a really good team again? I made a video on whether Chelsea should sack Graham Potter in my last video, so check that out, and thank you for watching.